Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on Super Bowl Sunday. Unfortunately, our Steelers are not playing tonight, but I just want to thank you guys so much for just a fantastic 2025 season of coverage here on Steelers Talk. Of course, we've been into our offseason coverage here for quite a few weeks now, ever since the Steelers got eliminated from the playoffs in the wild card round yet again. But now a new journey begins officially with the conclusion of the 2025 NFL season this evening. I hope you guys have a great time at your Super Bowl watch parties and all that different stuff. But today we got some Steelers news and some updates and some rumors to talk about. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because whether it's Super Bowl Sunday and it's my day off and I'm at home, or whether I'm on vacation or whatever the case may be, I'm going to make sure to get you guys breaking news coverage of the Pittsburgh Steelers every single day, let you guys know everything that's going on surrounding this football team, whether I'm in studio, whether I'm not. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, for yet another great season and off-season of Steelers coverage right here on the channel. All right, so we'll start here with the big one of the day, which is that Tom Pelissero from NFL Network reported today that the quote-unquote odds are increasing that Aaron Rodgers will be returning to the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2026 for his 22nd NFL season. This is what we've been saying on the channel for the last several weeks, guys, is that I think Rodgers is probably going to be coming back. I thought that with the Mike McCarthy hire, that this is what makes sense. Rodgers has said that his body feels good coming out of the 2025 season. He threw the ball pretty darn well for somebody of his age, for sure. He can still throw the ball 70 yards on a Hail Mary, for example. And, I thought that he elevated a group here with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025, a group that just did not have an adequate wide receiver room. You had DK Metcalf and then pretty much nobody else. Nobody else even got over 400 yards receiving this year in the wide receiver room for Pittsburgh. Yet despite that, they were above league average in points per game. They were around league average in EPA per play and success rate. They didn't turn the football over a lot. They didn't take a ton of sacks. They had the lowest pressure rate in the league because Rodgers was getting the ball out of his hands so quickly. And the players clearly want Rodgers back. So it sounds like the Steelers will definitely open the door for Aaron Rodgers to return if he wants to. And according to this new report from Tom Pelissero, the odds are increasing that he is going to walk through that door and come back to be the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback for a second season here in the Steel City. This was the direct quote from Pelissero this morning on the Insiders from NFL Network. He says, quote, Rodgers has not yet informed the Steelers whether he will return for a 22nd NFL season, but my understanding is that the odds are increasing. I am told Rodgers has spoken several times with new Steelers coach Mike McCarthy. Rodgers has also spoken with wide receiver DK Metcalf, who wants Rodgers back at age 42. The plan is for Rodgers to take a little bit more time, and everyone hopes he comes to a decision prior to the start of free agency in mid-March. But at this point, it would not be a surprise if Rodgers is back in Pittsburgh. So my thoughts on this whole situation, guys, is that, would Aaron Rodgers really be having several conversations with the new head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike McCarthy if he had no interest in returning for next season? I just feel like, this reminds me a lot of Rodgers having, quote unquote, several conversations with Mike Tomlin last year. And of course, that led to him eventually signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before mandatory minicamp. And, I think that, his relationship with McCarthy is a lot better than what it was at the end of his time in Green Bay. He was a little bit pissed off at McCarthy for letting go of Alex Van Pelt, the previous offensive coordinator there in Green Bay, and their relationship had really deteriorated that final season there at the Packers. But since then, they've reconciled. They're really close now. Rodgers has even told Connor Hughes, a New York Jets reporter, before he left the Jets, that if Mike McCarthy gets another head coaching job, that would be somewhere that he would like to play. With Rodgers, we know that Rodgers loved his time in Pittsburgh last year, and we know that he feels better emotionally and physically than he did coming out of either of his seasons with the New York Jets. That was a report that came out this week, is that Rodgers loved his time in Pittsburgh. His body feels good, and I think that would lend credence to the idea that he would be open to having another season in the National Football League. I kind of feel like if his body was was kind of breaking down. He wasn't in a good place physically, all that different stuff. If he still wasn't in a good place relationship-wise with Mike McCarthy, that this would be a decision that we probably already got from Aaron Rodgers. I kind of feel like if Rodgers was planning on retiring, we would have kind of already heard that by now. It's been a couple of weeks, and the stuff that we've been hearing is kind of to the contrary. Where like he's talking with players, he's talking with coaches about potentially coming back and all that different stuff. And even though we don't have firm word from Aaron Rodgers yet, it does seem like Rodgers is leaning towards coming back to play next year, and then he's coming back to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We also know that the entire Steelers organization, from the players in the locker room to the coaching staff to the front office to ownership, everybody wants Aaron Rodgers back next year. It's well reported by Brooke Pryor and others that the players inside the Steelers locker room pretty much universally told the front office and ownership that they want Rodgers back for another season. We've heard from Mike McCarthy saying that he would definitely want Rodgers back as his starting quarterback. We've heard from Omar Khan and Art Rooney that is also something that they are going to keep the door open to this offseason. So, it just seems like this is an organization here in the Pittsburgh Steelers that is in complete alignment. They want Aaron Rodgers back for another season. And, I bet that, the fact that this organization, is so universally wanting him back is something that Rodgers really likes. I mean, we know Rodgers, has a little bit of an ego to him, to say the least. And, the fact that all these guys are like begging him to come back for another season and wanting him to come back, he's got to feel wanted, and he's got to feel like, that he has a place and a home here in Pittsburgh. And I think that that's something that he really cherishes. And, another opportunity to work with DK Metcalf and build the chemistry that they built last year. And Pat Freiermuth, who he really built a great connection with at the end of last season, Darnell Washington, Jalen Warren, as well as the other players that they add this offseason. They could be bringing back Kenny Gainwell. I'm sure DK and Mike McCarthy are like, man, we're going to get you a big-time upgrade at the wide receiver position, and that's going to allow you to play your best football and take this team to the next level. I'm sure that's part of the pitch. I will also say that this report from Tom Pelissero that, McCarthy is, having several conversations with Rodgers, it kind of puts a damper on the rumors that we've gotten this week during Super Bowl week that, he could go to Minnesota or something like that. I think that's such a media-driven narrative because everyone wants him to, follow the Favre path and, go to Minnesota, especially because Kevin O'Connell, who he's close with, is the head coach there. But, we know that Aaron Rodgers, has spoken in his time here in Pittsburgh that if he were to come back, he'd love to come back here because he could build a second year of continuity. And that second year, I think, goes very underrated for a lot of people because, especially when you're joining a team during mandatory minicamp, you've already missed a lot of the OTAs. You're playing with players that you've never played before. It takes time to build that chemistry, that trust. And, in the system, like the kind of offense that Aaron Rodgers likes to run with a lot of option routes and all these different things, you have to know, and be on the same page with Rodgers and have that trust and chemistry. And you could argue that for a system like this, it makes more sense for Rodgers to, be even better in year two than he was in year one. And personally, you guys know this if you've been watching the channel, I'm very open. And in fact, I like the idea of Aaron Rodgers coming back for another season. I think there's a reason why the Steelers are making this their plan A is because they feel like there's no quarterback out there on the market that they could get this offseason that would give them a better chance to compete in the short term than Aaron Rodgers. I mean, the players clearly feel like that he can play. I mean, these guys, especially guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, guys that are getting older and they know that their window of opportunity to win championships is getting smaller by the year. Like if they didn't think Aaron Rodgers was capable of giving them the best chance to win a Super Bowl, they wouldn't be advocating for it. They'd be wanting to go in a new direction. They'd want to trade for Kyler Murray or bring in Malik Willis or draft a quarterback to start day one. They wouldn't be advocating for a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers to come back for a 22nd season if they didn't think that he was capable of leading this team heading into the short-term future. I also believe that Rodgers elevated this offense last year. I think you look at the numbers and where the Steelers finished, where they were, above league average in scoring offense. They were around league average in the advanced metrics. And, you look at the wide receiver room that Rodgers had to work with. Like, do I blame Rodgers for playing the way that he played last year, where it was a lot of dinking and dunking? It was a lot of getting the ball out quickly to his playmakers out in space. I think, when you look at this wide receiver room, DK Metcalf was getting double teamed very consistently. And then, the rest of the receiving group, Calvin, Roman, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Adam Thielen, they just couldn't get open down the field versus man coverage enough. And I think Rodgers just played, the smartest brand of football that he could, dumping the ball off to, the key strengths of the Steelers offense, which was its yak threats, right? Kenny Gainwell, Jaylen Warren, Darnell Washington, DK Metcalf. And, I think, given the supporting cast that he was given, not to mention the fact that Arthur Smith, for some reason, prioritized playing Jonnu Smith over Pat Freiermuth, and Jonnu actually ended up with the most snaps out of any tight end on the Steelers this year, which is unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. I look at this situation and I look at an improved offensive play caller. I look at a great opportunity to upgrade the wide receiver room. You've got the cap space, you've got the draft picks. There's no excuse for this team not to be able to put together a really good wide receiver duo at the very least, and a wide receiver trio. Ideally, like, you could get a really good, solid wide receiver free agent in free agency, like Jawan Jennings or Romeo Doubs, somebody that, is a solid veteran that can run routes the way that Aaron Rodgers expects them to be run. And then you can get a really talented young rookie, in the first or second round of the NFL draft. There's a lot of really good wide receiver talent in this year's class. And I think that, the opportunities for this Steelers team to put together a legitimately good to great wide receiver duo and trio this year gives this team, the upside proposition here, where Aaron Rodgers could be even better in year 2 here in Pittsburgh than he was in year 1. And I personally really like the idea of Rodgers coming back. And you might be saying at home, but Jack, he's a non-mobile quarterback. We need somebody that can move around and make plays out of structure. And I understand that thinking, man, but we've seen, older quarterbacks that are non-mobile guys have success in this league multiple times over the last decade in the NFL. Tom Brady, going from the 2019 Patriots, where he had Julian Edelman and nobody else, doesn't even, rank in the top 20 in most key metrics. That season. He goes to Tampa Bay at age 43, the same exact age Rodgers is going to be next year, and wins a Super Bowl once he gets an offensive-minded head coach in Bruce Arians, once he gets that legitimate wide receiver room with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown. Like, when you have a quarterback that can't, make plays out of structure, and I think Rodgers, I think it's fair to say he's not an out of structure guy anymore. You need a really good coach. I think that we've got one here in Mike McCarthy, who knows offensive football and knows how to get the most out of his personnel. And then also you need a really good receiver room, because, if you have a non-mobile quarterback, defense is going to play more man coverage against you, especially if you don't have a good wide receiver room. So the Steelers didn't provide Rodgers the wide receiver room that a quarterback like him really needs in order to thrive, whereas they have the opportunity to do that this year. So I really do believe that if, the Steelers can just make the proper moves at the wide receiver position this year, Aaron Rodgers could be even better in year 2 than he was in year 1, and this Steelers offense can be better in year 2 of an Aaron Rodgers era than it was in year 1. Now, before I go into a couple more news and rumors items here, before I say goodbye here today, guys, I want to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the big game is just hours away in Santa Clara, guys, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get in on the football action before next season. So close the year outright with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Sticking with the quarterback conversation here, guys, there's another quarterback option for the Steelers that they can consider next year that is now on the table, alongside Kyler Murray and Malik Willis and all these other guys that they can consider bringing in if Aaron Rodgers retires. But now Derek Carr, former Saints and Raiders quarterback, is now fielding phone calls to possibly return to the National Football League after taking a year off. Says that the report says that he needs the quote-unquote right situation to come out of retirement, but he is currently open and willing to return to the National Football League if the right opportunity presents itself. Now, personally, guys, I would prefer the Aaron Rodgers route to Derek Carr. You have more continuity with Rodgers. I think that Rodgers brings a higher level of football IQ than Derek Carr does, but plain simply, guys, if Rodgers retires, Derek Carr is absolutely on the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, it's not the best situation in the world. I'll be the first one to admit that. He doesn't play very well in cold weather. That's been something that he has been very well known for in his career, is that he does not play well in cold weather conditions. And, you kind of got to be able to play well in the cold if you're going to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC North. So that's honestly my biggest concern with Derek Carr. He also has 0 playoff wins in his career to his name. So for a fan base that is desperately craving playoff victories, bringing in a guy like Derek Carr, and pairing a quarterback in Derek Carr that's been known to not win playoff games with a head coach in Mike McCarthy that's also known for not winning playoff games. It's just a perfect recipe for Steelers fan frustration if the Steelers were to trade for Derek Carr. And that's another thing why I don't love the idea of bringing in Derek Carr over, say, bringing back Aaron Rodgers for another season, is you'd have to trade for Derek Carr, and you'd have to trade, a mid-round draft pick to bring him in here. Not to mention you're going to have to take on his contract, and which is a somewhat sizable contract. So, those are, a combination of factors that I don't love. Then also, it just feel like something very similar to what the Steelers have done the last couple of seasons, where they're bringing in a stopgap, short-term quarterback option. I mean, Derek Carr is only 34 years old, but he's already retired once. If he gets brought to the Steelers here, it's going to be a very similar thing every single offseason. Is Derek Carr going to retire? Is he going to come back? And I think Steelers fans, if you're going to go with more of if you're not going to bring back Aaron Rodgers back, I think people would much rather go with somebody in their 20s as the new starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and, kind of have a change of strategy there. But plain simply, guys, Derek Carr is one of the better, quarterback options out there on the market that's a veteran. So if Aaron Rodgers does decide to retire, I would expect Derek Carr to be among the guys, in their contingency plans, guys with Malik Willis and Kyler Murray. I kind of feel like Willis and Murray would be higher on the list than Derek Carr, or at least I hope that they would be. They're younger, they're more athletic, all those different things. But, Derek Carr is definitely going to be a part of that mix of quarterback possibilities for the Steelers if Aaron Rodgers retires this year. But as we discussed earlier in the video, I think Rodgers is going to return. So I don't think we're in the end going to have to worry about Derek Carr becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler. I think we're going to get another year of Aaron Rodgers. I think the Steelers are going to have Will Howard and then probably another younger quarterback to develop behind Rodgers for a year, and then they'll evaluate the quarterback position again in 2027. That's what I think the quarterback situation is going to look like here in Pittsburgh this year. And frankly, I think that's a good plan. If you can turn Will Howard or another younger quarterback, maybe they bring in a Trey Lance or a Will Levis or Anthony Richardson or somebody like that, and try to see if they can develop one of those guys under Rodgers to be a future quarterback option. Or maybe they draft a Drew Aller or a Garrett Nussmeier. The opportunities to bring in younger quarterbacks to develop for a year are definitely interesting if Aaron Rodgers returns for another year. So keep that in mind. But I want to finish up today's show, guys, with a little bit of a rumor here. Cam Heyward, obviously is contemplating whether or not to come back for the final year of his current contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers or to retire. And he posted a cryptic post on social media today where it was a GIF of a book closing, and, that could possibly indicate that he could be thinking about retirement. He is going to be contributing to NBC's coverage of the Super Bowl tonight. So if you're watching the pregame show or whatever, I'm sure you'll probably see Cam Heyward during that coverage of it. Maybe he'll even make an announcement tonight. Who knows? But the fact that he's putting out there a GIF of a book closing could mean I'm closing the book on my NFL career. Now, something else that it could mean is that tonight's the Super Bowl, so maybe the book closing is just we're closing the book on the 2025 NFL season. That could certainly be a possibility as well. But something that I'll say here, guys, is that if you're hoping Aaron Rodgers retires and that the Steelers go with a different option at quarterback, I think Cam Heyward retiring would increase the chances of Rodgers also retiring, because I know Cam and Aaron are really close. They've gotten really close over the course of this season. They were, fellow team captains, and I'm sure part of the reason why Rodgers would think about returning is to try and win a Super Bowl for Cam before he retires. So if Rodgers, doesn't have that as a part of the calculus here, and Cam is not returning for another season here in Pittsburgh, I would say that increases the chances of Rodgers not coming back. Although it sounds like, Rodgers, would be coming back to play for Mike McCarthy and James Campen and the number of coaches that he has connections with on this new Steelers coaching staff. So I would still say, even if Cam retires, Rodgers is most likely going to be coming back this year, but I do think it would decrease the chances of it, just because, Cam going into the final year of his career, the last dance, so to speak, I think that would increase the chances of Rodgers wanting to come back and deliver a championship for his fellow team captain. So that'll be it for today's show, guys. I'm already over 20 minutes here, so I just want to thank you guys so much for joining me here today. If we get any more updates throughout the course of the day, I'll probably get another video out to you guys. But if not, I'm going to enjoy my Super Bowl Sunday here and watch the Seahawks and Patriots battle it out to see who will be the kings of the National Football League here for the 2025 season. So thank you guys so much for joining me here today. I will see you guys next time. And until then, guys, here we go, Steelers.